Hey guys, Professor Ader here. Welcome back to the seventh and final part of the Civil War PowerPoint. We're going to go from Vicksburg through the end of the war. Yesterday, we talked about the Battle of Gettysburg and the fact that it lasts from July 1st to July 3rd of 1863. Well, the very next day, July 4th, the siege of Vicksburg, Mississippi ends. Now, this is a 6-week siege. This is General Grant finally finishing his task of basically controlling the Mississippi River region of the Civil War battlefield. This ends up basically cutting Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana out of the Civil War. I mean, there's still stuff that goes on, but this has cut a line straight down beside Arkansas and Louisiana and separated them from the rest of the Confederacy. This causes people in the North to ease up on the we need to get out of this idea. It also causes Britain and France to stop helping the Confederacy at all. Not like openly helping them, but even selling them stuff to use for the war. Britain and France stopped doing that. This also is around the time that we get the North instituting a draft. We already saw the South having a draft, the cradle to grave draft. This is for the North, and it's here in 1863. You can see this newspaper over here on the left. The draft happening in September of 1863. This one's in Ohio. Trying to get more soldiers in to help in the war effort. They're going to recruit Irish immigrants. They're going to recruit African Americans. Anybody that can help, they're going to try to get in to military service. Here you can see, just like in the South, if you are rich enough, you can hire someone else to fight for you, a substitute. Just like any other political idea, there are people that aren't happy. In New York City, we have draft riots that happen. Here you can see barricades that are set up. These lines over here, attacks on property are all the fire symbols. The what look like baseball bats are attacks on African Americans. And big time clashes, big time fights are the yellow, like sunburst, explosion-y symbols. General Grant gets transferred to eastern Tennessee. He did so well at Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. He's going to be given an opportunity to take the rest of Tennessee, and he easily does so. 3 days, November 23rd through the 25th, he takes over Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he opens up a lane for the Anaconda Plan to continue. Remember, part of the Anaconda Plan is to cut the Confederacy up into smaller and smaller pieces. With Tennessee now being in control of the North, the only state that's in between the North and the Atlantic Ocean is Georgia. From May 4th to June 12th, Grant, who is now in charge of the Union Army, is going to go through this wilderness campaign. And Grant goes by that idea that you attack the enemy's strength at every turn. He starts out with 100,000 men, and in about 5 weeks, he loses about half of them. Cold Harbor on June 3rd of 1864, I mentioned for one reason. It's the last time that Lee wins a battle. General Grant attacks, even though it's almost literally impossible for him to win this position that Lee is in, and Lee wins, and Grant has to withdraw for the last time against Lee. People aren't very happy with Grant and his idea that you just keep pushing, just win, doesn't matter the cost. You can lose as many people as you need because we have more people. Some people don't like that, like especially soldiers. I mean, if you were asked to join a group and they said, oh, part of the group is there's a 50% chance that you don't survive, a lot of people aren't going to be willing to join that group. Like I said, Grant starts out with 100,000 guys, and in 5 weeks, he's lost half of them. So 50% survival rate is not the best. September of 1864, General Sherman gets to Atlanta. If you've ever seen the movie Gone with the Wind, this is what's happening in that movie. You have General Sherman, who is moving toward Atlanta, and then eventually capturing Atlanta. He tells the people, you better get out. In November, he burns Atlanta to the ground, destroys it. In the middle of all this, you have the election of 1864. So Lincoln is running the nation and also campaigning to be president again. He has faced some opposition. The Congressional Committee on the Conduct of War that was formed at the very beginning of the war has kind of been on him about some things that he did, which, I mean, maybe rightfully so. Remember, he suspended the writ of habeas corpus. He closed some newspapers down, threw some newspaper editors in jail. Some things that weren't necessarily his to do, he does. There's also a group that's openly trying to stop him from being able to do things that he thinks he needs to do. They're called the Peace Democrats. They're Democrats that want there to not be war. They are openly obstructing. They're trying to attack the draft. They're trying to personally attack Lincoln, not like punch him in the face, but putting out stories about him, things like that. Some true, some exaggerations of the truth. And eventually even emancipation and what that's actually going to mean. Lincoln's kind of afraid that he's going to lose. So in 1864, we have no Republican Party. Now, a lot of things you're going to see are going to show that he was a Republican president because technically he was, but he chooses a war Democrat, one of the Democrats that wanted war, to be his vice president. And together, instead of being a Republican and a Democrat, they call themselves the Union Party. The Peace Democrats have to find their candidate, and they want somebody who is charismatic, somebody who people like, somebody that knows about war, because you don't just want me to go in and say, I can fix this. You want somebody that has some credentials, somebody that when they say they know about war, you believe them. They need somebody who not only do the people think can win the war, but that person thinks that they can win the war. They need somebody like George McClellan. George McClellan basically comes in and his campaign is, I'm not Lincoln. I know what I'm doing. He doesn't. Vote for me. That's it. Vote for me. I mean, like, why would you not vote for me? I've been in charge of the army. I know what's going on. The soldiers like me. They listen to me. I know what I'm doing. I've got a plan. Vote for me. And this might have worked, but with Atlanta being captured, some wins in Alabama and even some in Virginia, we start getting people pulling for Lincoln again. And it pushes them back toward Lincoln. One of the Copperhead posters that they put up depict Lincoln as the king of the Africans, Abraham Africanus the First, saying that he doesn't care about you white people. All he cares about is the slaves. That's all he's worried about. That's an effective way to try to get white people to not vote for Lincoln. If he doesn't care about you, why would you vote for him? If all he cares about is this one group, why would you vote for him? That doesn't make any sense. This could have been effective, and it may have been effective. There are about 4 million people that vote in the election of 1864. About 2.2 million of them vote for Lincoln, and about 1.8 million of them vote for McClellan. And when you see this map, you're going to see gray, which is going to be territories which can't vote. Blue, which is Confederate states, which also can't vote because they're not part of the Union. The yellow is going to be George McClellan, and the green is going to be Abraham Lincoln. If you look close enough, you'll be able to see by the colors which side won. You may have to look very closely, but if you look close enough, you can see that it looks like Lincoln might have won this one. Again, Confederate states don't get to vote because they're not part of the United States. Lincoln wins, hands down, super easy. Sherman goes from Atlanta and he starts marching toward the sea, and he decides that he wants to wage what he calls, or we call, total war. He is going to destroy everything. Eventually, this is going to include destroying bridges and like even ripping up railroad tracks and bending them so they can't be used anymore. What he wants to do is make it to where the South and people who are fighting realize that there are real consequences to their fighting. He's basically saying, if we fight them and they come home and everything's fine, they're not really going to learn their lesson. But if they come back and nothing's here, maybe they'll stop. Maybe. Sherman marches to the sea and he seizes Savannah, Georgia. After he takes Savannah, he starts moving north towards South Carolina, and he does even more destruction there. Remember, South Carolina is where Fort Sumter was, the first battle of the Civil War, and South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union. They're the ones, in Sherman's mind, that started all of this. He destroys the capital of Columbia, South Carolina, and he starts moving north toward North Carolina. Here we see the final Virginia campaign. Here's the Wilderness campaign. We have Spotsylvania Courthouse, and we have Lee with his back toward Richmond and Grant moving over. Here's that Cold Harbor win. This is all of the little fights that Grant ends up giving to Lee through here. On April 9th, Wilmer McLean is out walking near his house, and a young soldier walks up to him and says, "Sir, the general would like to use your house." Wilmer McLean, the new resident of Pennsylvania, he used to have a house back in Manassas, Virginia, says, "Okay." And it's in his parlor, his front den, his living room area, that the peace treaty is signed between General Lee and General Grant. Grant gives Lee a lot. Abraham Lincoln travels to Richmond, and he starts walking the streets of Richmond. And as he's walking the streets, freed slaves are out cheering in the streets and celebrating. Here's the progression of territory. The yellow is what the Union has in 1861. The grayish brown is what they have in 1862. The green is 1863. The purple is 1864. And the red is 1865. Five days after the surrendered Appomattox Courthouse, Abraham Lincoln goes to Ford's Theater with his wife and some friends, and he is going to watch Our American Cousin, and John Wilkes Booth sneaks in and shoots Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head. Remember, Lincoln is not in the Republican Party at this time. He's in the Union Party. And with Lincoln's death, we don't have a Republican taking over. We have a Democrat, Andrew Johnson, taking over, who has some different ideas than what Lincoln had about how this war should end. Here you see some of the conspirators being hanged, including Mary Surratt there on the left. This is an actual picture of the actual hanging that happens there. Guys, there'll be some links down below. There's some books, some really good books about this. Some of you have already read some of them. There'll be a playlist down below as well of all the Civil War stuff. Also a link to the podcast if you'd like to listen to this. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys next time.